Power does not flourish in noise, but in silence. The man who shows his strength before it is required exposes himself to envy, to scrutiny, to rivals who sharpen their daggers in the dark. To display too much is to invite the storm, for human nature cannot endure the triumph of another without tasting bitterness. The one who parades his wealth, his victories, his connections, arms his enemies with knowledge. He hands them the map of his fortress, the shape of his defenses, the limits of his reach. And once they know where your edges lie, they will press against them until you break. The art of survival lies not in spectacle but in concealment. A weapon hidden is feared more than a weapon brandished. Men respect what they cannot measure. They plot against what they can see, but they hesitate before what remains invisible. The mystery of your power multiplies it beyond its true weight. Understand this. Most men are driven not by admiration but by resentment. If you shine too brightly, they will seek to dim you. If you speak too loudly, they will hunger to silence you. If you rise too quickly, they will conspire to pull you down. To show off is to give them cause, and cause is the seed of betrayal. Restrain your victories. Let them echo in whispers, not in shouts. Let others discover your strength in their own fear, not in your proclamation. The greatest rulers do not need to declare their dominance. It is felt in the air, in the caution of their rivals, in the hesitation of their allies. What you must learn is this: invisibility is not weakness, it is strategy. To walk quietly, to conceal your ambition, to allow others to underestimate you, this is the beginning of mastery. For when the decisive moment arrives, your strike will land with the weight of surprise, and your silence will be remembered as cunning, not emptiness. The man who shows off dies by his vanity. The man who conceals lives by his calculation. Choose wisely, for the world does not forgive the arrogance of spectacle. It punishes it with envy, plots, and downfall. But it respects the shadow, for the shadow hides the blade. The world is a stage where every gesture is observed, weighed, and judged. Yet the clever actor knows that the most dangerous role is the one played too loudly. To crave applause is to become dependent on the crowd, and the crowd is fickle, driven by jealousy more than loyalty. They will cheer for you one day, then plot against you the next. A ruler, a strategist, a leader cannot afford to bind his fate to the unstable moods of others. The moment you begin to show off, you stop commanding and start begging for recognition. Power never begs. It exists beyond the approval of the masses, secured not in their admiration, but in their fear of losing what they do not understand. To keep your force hidden is not cowardice, it is prudence. A general who reveals his entire formation before the battle begins ensures his defeat. A statesman who boasts of every alliance invites those who envy him to break them. The wise conceal the machinery of their power, allowing only fragments to escape, fragments that confuse more than they clarify. For clarity is a gift to rivals, and obscurity is a weapon sharper than steel. Consider the difference between the flame and the ember. The flame is bright, spectacular, admired for its beauty, but it burns out quickly, leaving behind only ash. The ember is quiet, unnoticed, yet it carries within it the capacity to ignite forests, to outlast storms, to endure where brilliance fades. To show off is to burn like the flame. To conceal is to endure like the ember. The future belongs not to those who display, but to those who wait, who plan, who strike only when the moment assures victory. It is not the abundance of talent or wealth that destroys a man, but the need to parade it. Enemies need only a spark of resentment to unite against you. Friends, too, will turn once the shadow of your superiority eclipses their pride. Even those you elevate will grow restless under the weight of your display. Every excess creates a debt of hostility, and debts of hostility are always repaid in betrayal. Silence, restraint, and timing are the true ornaments of power. Do not chase recognition, for recognition is a fleeting mistress. Chase, instead, the architecture of influence, built in secrecy, revealed only in decisive acts. Let your rivals underestimate you. Their error is your strength. Let your allies think you need them. Their illusion binds them closer. Let the crowd remain uncertain. Their unease preserves your authority. Remember this: the man who must show off proves only that he is unsure of himself. The man who does not need to show off is already feared, already respected, already beyond the reach of vanity. The choice between concealment and spectacle is the choice between survival and ruin. The world rewards cunning, not performance. It crowns the strategist, not the showman. And those who forget this truth write their downfall with their own hands, in their desperate hunger to be seen. To be unseen is to be unassailable, for the strike that is not anticipated cannot be parried. The moment you reveal the full measure of your strength, you invite comparison, and comparison breeds challenge. Men cannot tolerate what they cannot surpass. They will rather conspire to diminish it than accept their place beneath it. Thus, the one who flaunts his triumphs arms the resentment of others, while the one who conceals them lets envy decay in uncertainty. The greatest fortress is not built of stone, but of doubt. Let others question your resources, your reach, your intentions. Doubt immobilizes more effectively than fear, for fear can be measured, but doubt is endless. If they believe you weak, they hesitate to move against you, uncertain whether they risk underestimating you. If they believe you strong, they hesitate again, uncertain whether they risk overestimating you. To live in the shadows of uncertainty is to make your rivals prisoners of their own calculations. Do not mistake modesty for concealment. Modesty seeks approval. Concealment seeks control. To lower your head humbly before the crowd is still to acknowledge their gaze, but to withhold entirely, to leave them without measure, without spectacle, is to deny them the very substance upon which envy feeds. True power is not modest. It is opaque. It does not explain itself. It does not seek witness. It simply exists, pressing upon the world in silence until its presence can no longer be ignored. The arrogance of showing off lies in forgetting that every eye that admires you today may one day turn against you. A victory displayed is not just a moment of pride, but also a declaration of threat to those who wish to hold their ground. They will not forgive you for exposing their weakness, and they will not rest until your brightness has been dim. Better to let them believe the victory was fortune, chance, or even theirs to share, while you continue to accumulate strength beyond their perception. Silence, after all, is the great conspirator. Words betray, gestures expose, but silence hides both intent and capacity. It leaves others filling the void with their own fears, their own imaginings, which often exaggerate your strength more than your boasting ever could. To show off is to set boundaries around your power. To remain silent is to make it infinite in the minds of others. In the end, the man who does not show off commands twice, once by his hidden reality, and once again by the illusions others weave around him. He reigns not in the theater of applause, but in the unseen machinery of consequence, where perception bends to his advantage and action answers only to necessity. This is the essence of rule, not to be loved for what is displayed, but to be obeyed for what cannot be measured. The hunger to display is a hunger to be validated, and nothing is more dangerous for a ruler than dependence on validation. The moment you need the applause of others, you place your survival in their hands. Power that relies on recognition is power already weakened, for recognition is not stable. It shifts with the winds of mood, rumor, and envy. The wise man understands that what is admired today may be condemned tomorrow, and he refuses to chain his fate to such fragile currents. Excessive display also exhausts its own effect. What dazzles at first grows ordinary with repetition, and what once inspired awe soon invites criticism. The more you show, the more you are expected to show again, until your audience becomes insatiable and your resources depleted. What was once a weapon becomes a burden. To feed the eyes of others is to starve the strength of oneself. The ruler who guards his reserves, who chooses when to reveal and when to conceal, never finds himself at the mercy of this endless demand. True command thrives in scarcity. A single gesture of power, rare and decisive, strikes deeper than constant noise. A single decisive act, unveiled at the moment of necessity, carries the weight of inevitability. But endless display dilutes meaning as a blade drawn too often loses its edge. The man who parades his strength too freely teaches his enemies how to resist it, while the one who keeps it hidden denies them the chance to prepare. Human nature is not noble enough to rejoice sincerely in another's success. Beneath every cheer lies a seed of resentment. The more loudly you trumpet your victories, the more bitterly others will plot to erase them. Even allies will grow restless in your shadow. Even friends will come to despise your brilliance if it leaves them diminished. To reveal too much is to plant enmity in every corner, while to conceal is to remain tolerable, if not underestimated. And being underestimated is the safest mask of all, for it invites negligence from rivals until it is too late for them to resist. The air of mystery does more for your power than the glare of spectacle ever could. Men fear what they cannot define. They respect what they cannot measure. They hesitate before what they cannot predict. To be unseen is to be limitless, and to be limitless is to control not only the battlefield but the imagination of those who would oppose you. Thus, the ruler, the strategist, the survivor must resist the intoxicating temptation to show off. For to indulge it is to gamble with envy, with hostility, with ruin. Better to let silence be your crown, invisibility your shield, patience your sharpest blade. What you do not show cannot be challenged. What you do not reveal cannot be betrayed. In the theater of power, the brightest light burns the quickest, but the shadow endures. Showing off is the disease of the insecure. It is the confession that one's power does not rest solidly enough to be silent. The need to parade triumphs is the need to remind the world of something that should already be unquestionable. But what must constantly be reminded is already in doubt. Authority that is truly secure speaks without words, enforces without noise, and makes its presence felt without a single boast. The highest form of strength is invisible because it does not need to be announced. To boast is to bind yourself to the past. Each display is a monument to what has already been achieved, and monuments are fixed, immobile, unable to grow. Rivals then study these monuments, searching for cracks, rehearsing how they might be toppled. Meanwhile, the ruler who does not display continues to build in silence, unobserved, always one step ahead of what others imagine. Power grows most effectively where it is least scrutinized. The theater of appearances is treacherous because it transforms leadership into performance. Once you begin to show off, you cease to lead for necessity and begin to lead for applause. Applause is hollow currency. It cannot pay for loyalty. It cannot secure survival. It cannot silence enemies. But it does deceive, and men intoxicated by recognition forget that admiration fades as quickly as it is given. Envy lingers far longer, and envy is what kills. Consider that in nature, the most lethal predators do not roar before they strike. The serpent does not rattle unless cornered. Its true power lies in the silent coil, in the strike that comes unseen. To show off is to rattle endlessly, warning all prey and alerting every hunter. To conceal is to prepare, to wait, to strike when the opponent has grown careless. Noise makes others vigilant. Silence makes them vulnerable. Every display is also a signal of your limits. When you reveal your treasures, your victories, your resources, you show not only what you possess, but also where the boundaries of your possession end. Rivals then calculate how much remains, and calculation is the first step to resistance. Better to let them wander in uncertainty, unsure whether your strength is endless or merely concealed. Uncertainty paralyzes more effectively than any show of wealth or force. To master the game of power is to master invisibility. Not invisibility of existence, but invisibility of intention. Let them see you, but not know you. Let them hear of your deeds, but not of your designs. Let them suspect your reach, but never confirm it. This way they remain bound in hesitation, fearing to challenge what they cannot define, unable to prepare against what they cannot predict. The one who shows off is already enslaved to the eyes of others. The one who conceals commands both his own fate and the imagination of his enemies. And imagination, once captured, is a stronger prison than chains of iron. It is in this prison that power becomes untouchable. Observe the merchant who adorns himself with gold, parading through the marketplace with carriages and guards. His rivals take note not of his grandeur, but of his roots, his guards' weaknesses, the rhythm of his movements. Soon, thieves conspire, competitors plot, officials invent charges, and the same display that won him envy becomes the reason for his ruin. Contrast him with the quieter merchant who dresses plainly, whose accounts seem modest, whose wealth flows invisibly through networks of allies and discreet exchanges. While the first is robbed of coin and reputation, the second grows rich in silence, hidden from scrutiny, feared only when he chooses to reveal his true reach. Look to the ambitious minister who boasts openly of his king's favor. He struts before the court, wearing titles like armor, announcing every privilege as if it were eternal. The courtiers, humiliated by his arrogance, unite in whispers. They speak of his insolence, of his disregard, of his unchecked pride. One evening, the king, weary of hearing so many murmurs, sacrifices the minister not for disloyalty but for arrogance. His boasting arms his rivals with arguments, and he becomes the victim of his own tongue. Another minister, more cunning, feigns modest influence. He speaks rarely, acts cautiously, and lets others underestimate his proximity to the king. In the decisive hour, when power shifts, his quiet patience ensures survival, while the braggart's bones are already buried. Consider the commander in the field who flaunts his numbers. He parades his soldiers before the enemy, believing intimidation will secure surrender. But the enemy, once aware of the exact size, prepares accordingly, seeking allies to balance the scales. The war that might have been won through doubt becomes prolonged, costly, uncertain. A wiser commander allows scouts to spread rumors of endless reinforcements, yet never confirms them. His silence breeds fear larger than reality, paralyzing the enemy with hesitation, surrendering not to strength but to uncertainty. Examine also the politician of our age, who displays every luxury of his life on glowing screens, eager for admiration. He believes visibility is influence, yet the very visibility he craves becomes a ledger for his enemies. They catalog his possessions, trace his benefactors, expose the excess, and ignite resentment among the masses. The applause fades, the accusations remain. In contrast, the strategist who lives with restraint, who lets the crowd see little of his life, robs his opponents of ammunition. His strength lies not in being admired, but in being difficult to attack, his silence insulating him from scandal. Even in the private sphere, the same law applies. The man who flaunts his relationships, his victories, his fortune, creates expectations he cannot always sustain. When fortune shifts, as it always does, the fall is witnessed by all, and ridicule magnifies the wound. But the man who guards his successes, who lets them unfold unseen, falls quietly when he must, and rises again without scars. Concealment protects not only from enemies, but from the cruelty of spectators. Power is not in what is shown, but in what is withheld. Every example across ages proves this truth. The boastful perish, the silent endure. The lesson repeats itself endlessly, yet men, intoxicated by vanity, rush again to the stage, hungry for recognition, blind to the trap it sets. Those who resist this urge walk the darker, quieter path of endurance, and it is on that path that dominion is secured. Power thrives where anticipation collapses. To reveal too much is to allow others to predict you, and what is predictable can be controlled. The true strategist erases patterns, denies certainty, and makes every step appear disconnected from the last until the design is revealed too late to resist. What you conceal is not merely your strength but your rhythm, for rhythm is the blueprint of defeat when placed in the hands of rivals. To govern appearances is to govern outcomes. The ruler who understands that perception shapes reality commands even before he acts. When nothing is certain about your intention, every possibility is feared. In this fear, others restrain themselves, negotiate with themselves, weaken themselves before they ever confront you. This is power without expenditure, control purchased by ambiguity alone. Reputation, once tied to spectacle, becomes a prison. The man who defines himself through what is seen is bound to repeat it endlessly, trapped in the demands of the audience. He becomes servant to the image he has projected, unable to adapt, unable to vanish when the moment requires disappearance. True mastery lies in detachment from display, in the freedom to act invisibly, to shift form and vanish from sight without debt to expectation. Control requires patience. The hunger to display is a hunger to accelerate, to claim recognition before the foundation is unshakable. But haste is the enemy of permanence. Those who reveal themselves too soon expend their strength before it can mature into inevitability. Silence allows roots to grow deep, unobserved, until the structure above is immovable. To wait unseen is not delay. It is incubation, and incubation is the womb of unassailable power. Every revelation must be purposeful, every act of visibility a weapon rather than a vanity. When power reveals itself, it must be decisive, unanswerable, leaving no time for envy to transform into rebellion. A ruler cannot afford unnecessary demonstrations. Each movement must either cement authority or destroy opposition. Anything else is weakness disguised as pride. The world belongs not to those who are most admired, but to those who are least understood. For admiration invites imitation, but mystery enforces distance. To be admired is to be compared. To be mysterious is to be beyond reach. And in the realm of politics, where comparison breeds rivalry, distance ensures survival. Thus, the path is narrow, cold, and demanding. To walk without spectacle, to build without witness, to let others remain uncertain, disoriented, and hesitant. This is not humility, it is strategy. It is not modesty, it is domination by another name. The shadow, not the spotlight, is where the architecture of enduring command is constructed. The moment of action must arrive as if summoned by fate itself, sudden and unavoidable, leaving no room for resistance. Such force is only possible when it is not preceded by a trail of boastful signals. Those who telegraph their intent give their adversaries time to weave countermeasures. Those who remain obscure strike as inevitability, not choice. Invisibility transforms strategy into destiny, and destiny is rarely opposed. Power that endures is quiet, because it does not need to be loud. The strongest structures are not those that dazzle the eye, but those whose foundations lie buried, unseen, beneath layers of stone and earth. Applause is fleeting, but stability is eternal. To construct a rule that lasts requires the patience to forego recognition and the discipline to deny the hunger of vanity. For vanity is not just a flaw, it is the slow poison of authority. The true ruler learns to see men as instruments of their own undoing. Vanity leads them into exposure, pride drives them into excess, and the need for validation betrays their secrets. By resisting these same impulses, by refusing to display, one gains not only an advantage, but a mirror into the weakness of others. The parade of fools becomes predictable, and predictability is the leash by which they are guided. Restraint is not emptiness, it is concentration. What is concealed gathers weight. The unseen grows heavier in the imagination until it outweighs what is known. A hidden force multiplies itself, because men fear not what they see, but what they cannot measure. This multiplication is the economy of silence, where concealment yields more influence than display ever could. A man who governs his ambition in secrecy is like the hunter who stalks quietly through the forest. Every step is measured, every breath subdued, until the prey no longer senses danger. Then, in an instant, the strike is certain. The forest does not applaud the hunter's patience, but the kill is his. Power does not ask for admiration, it asks only for obedience. Thus, the path of survival is carved not in brilliance, but in shadows. It is the ability to move unseen, to speak without revealing, to act without forewarning. To show off is to decorate a target upon your own chest. To conceal is to leave no mark for arrows to find. The one who resists spectacle holds the field long after the applause of others has vanished. The architecture of power is not built on visibility, but on endurance. What is displayed too early becomes vulnerable, but what is cultivated in silence matures beyond reach. Time is the most loyal ally of the concealed, for while others expend themselves in pursuit of fleeting attention, the silent builder accumulates resources, allies, and knowledge without interference. His progress is invisible until it is irreversible, and by the time the world takes notice, it is already too late to oppose him. Those who rule through spectacle become prisoners of their own performance. Every gesture must be larger than the last, every victory louder, every indulgence more extravagant. This escalation consumes not only their resources, but also their freedom, for they are no longer acting out of necessity, but out of obligation to an image. In contrast, the one who hides his strength acts only when compelled by strategy. His movements remain deliberate, measured, and insulated from the suffocating demands of appearances. Power seeks silence because silence preserves choice. Once you display everything you possess, you eliminate the element of surprise and restrict yourself to a single path. But when your depths are unknown, you retain the freedom to shift, to adapt, to strike from unexpected angles. Freedom of action is the true lifeblood of dominion, and it withers the moment vanity dictates exposure. To remain unseen is also to control narrative. For men invent stories to explain what they cannot see, and their inventions often exceed the truth. A concealed force appears limitless because imagination grants it boundaries more expansive than reality could ever provide. Thus, the hidden ruler is stronger in rumor than the boastful one is in fact, and rumor, once seeded, becomes a shadow army marching ahead of every decision, weakening opposition before the battle begins. Discretion is not withdrawal from the world. It is command over how the world perceives you, to disappear when noise is expected, to remain silent when provocation demands reply, to withhold triumph when celebration is tempting. These acts of denial bend perception itself. They force others to look inward, to doubt their understanding, to calculate in vain. Each unanswered question is a chain binding them, while each unguarded boast would have been a key to your undoing. Therefore, the highest form of rule is exercised not through the spectacle of presence, but through the discipline of absence. To be absent from display, absent from expectation, absent from the desperate need to be seen, this absence is power itself. It leaves the world unbalanced, uncertain, and ever vulnerable to the moment you choose to step forward. And when that moment comes, your silence will have prepared the ground so thoroughly that resistance collapses before the battle even begins. Invisibility is not emptiness, but tension. Like the bowstring drawn back yet unseen in the tall grass, those who rely on spectacle spend their strength in advance, exhausting their advantage before the contest has begun. But silence preserves potential, and potential, when finally unleashed, arrives with the force of inevitability. What is concealed accumulates power. What is flaunted bleeds it away. The craving to be seen is the most seductive trap for those who rise. Recognition feels like conquest, but it is merely exposure. Each gaze upon you is a measure taken, each applause a signal of your reach, each celebration a catalogue of your resources. The more they see, the more they calculate. And calculation, once perfected, gives birth to opposition. Concealment denies them the arithmetic of resistance. It robs them of certainty, forcing them to live not with facts but with fear. Patience is the companion of concealment. To restrain yourself when provocation invites display is to practice the discipline that separates rulers from pretenders. Vanity urges haste, strategy demands delay. What is delayed ripens, what ripens cannot be undone. To wait in silence while others exhaust themselves in noise is to guarantee that when your strike comes, it will not meet strength but fatigue. The architecture of concealment also secures loyalty. Men follow not the one who shines brightest, but the one they cannot fully read. For what they do not understand, they respect. What they cannot predict, they obey. Uncertainty breeds caution, and caution ties their hands more effectively than chains. Thus, the concealed ruler commands not only through action, but through the paralysis his ambiguity imposes. Vanity blinds the proud to the dangers they invite, but concealment sharpens the eyes of the patient. In silence, one sees more clearly the betrayals forming in shadows, the ambitions swelling in allies, the weaknesses sprouting in rivals. To show off is to fix your gaze outward, desperate for response. To conceal is to turn your gaze inward and outward at once, mastering both yourself and the field around you. What endures is never last. Rivers carve valleys not by roaring, but by persistence. Winds reshape mountains not by display, but by constancy. So too does power last. not in the burst of spectacle, but in the quiet, unseen persistence of will, strategy, and discipline. And when the age has passed and only ruins remain, it will be the silent builder, not the boastful performer, whose work endures in stone and memory. Power does not require spectacle to affirm its existence. It requires only consequence. A decision executed with precision carries more weight than 100 declarations shouted into the air. Those who confuse visibility with authority soon discover that the crowd applauds today but abandons tomorrow, while the effects of quiet calculation endure long after the echoes of cheers have faded. Every display becomes a mirror that traps its maker. To show wealth obliges you to sustain its image. To show strength obliges you to repeat its performance. To show favor obliges you to defend it against those who feel excluded. The chain of expectations grows heavier with each exhibition, and soon the master becomes servant to the very image he has projected. Concealment severs these chains, allowing freedom of maneuver, freedom to adapt, freedom to act without the burden of constant justification. The politics of appearances is a battlefield littered with corpses of those who sought to dazzle rather than endure. For admiration can be stolen, replicated, or redirected, but the unseen cannot be copied. When men cannot trace the source of your stability, they cannot imitate it. They are left grasping at shadows, fighting against what they cannot grasp. And in their frustration, they exhaust themselves, leaving you untouched, preserved in silence. The essence of concealment is not retreat, but control. To decide what others know of you and when they know it is to shape their behavior before you even act. Their uncertainty bends them toward caution. Their caution bends them toward hesitation. Their hesitation delivers them into your hands without a blow being struck. What they cannot confirm, they cannot oppose with conviction. Thus, concealment is not absence but domination in its purest form. The desire to display springs from insecurity, the need to conceal from discipline. Insecurity seeks light, discipline embraces shadow. Insecurity spends itself in noise, discipline accumulates strength in silence. And history belongs to the disciplined, for vanity burns quickly, but patience survives the storm. The man who learns to resist the intoxication of spectacle secures not only his survival, but his ascendancy, for he is no longer prisoner to the eyes of others, but master of the field unseen. Power that is invisible cannot be diminished. Power that is unseen cannot be betrayed. Power that is concealed cannot be resisted until it is too late. To embrace concealment is not to hide from the world, but to force the world to move blindly, while you alone see clearly. And in that blindness, the fate of others is sealed. Silence is not absence, but architecture. It is the unseen scaffolding upon which dominion is built. To display yourself is to construct your palace of glass, transparent and fragile, admired from afar but vulnerable to every stone. To remain concealed is to build underground, in foundations too deep to be unearthed, where time itself becomes your ally. The palace of glass shatters with the first upheaval. The fortress in shadow endures even when storms rage. To show off is to announce boundaries, to draw lines that others may study and cross. Concealment erases boundaries, dissolves contours, and makes the self infinite in the imagination of others. When men cannot discern where your reach begins or ends, they attribute to you forces far greater than reality, and this exaggeration multiplies your true strength without cost. Visibility shrinks. Invisibility expands. The concealed strategist is never forced to defend what has not been displayed. He cannot be robbed of treasures no one knows he possesses, nor attacked for weapons never revealed. He is free from the burdens that spectacle imposes, free to act according to necessity, not vanity. His power flows quietly, like an underground river unseen, unstoppable, shaping landscapes in silence until its presence becomes undeniable. Showing off invites challengers because it awakens rivalry. Concealment denies them the grounds on which to compete. They cannot rival what they cannot define, nor surpass what they cannot measure. Instead, they turn their competition inward, consuming themselves in futile comparisons, leaving you unopposed. Concealment disarms without a blow, defeats without engagement, rules without exposure. The strength of concealment also lies in its unpredictability. A visible force must remain consistent, for deviation exposes weakness. A concealed force may shift endlessly, adopting new forms, adjusting to new circumstances, without scrutiny. Flexibility is the privilege of the unseen, while rigidity imprisons the one who performs for the crowd. Thus, concealment is not merely protection, it is freedom, the ability to shape one's destiny without the leash of expectation. In the theater of power, applause is an illusion, but fear and uncertainty are real currencies. Applause fades with time, fear lingers in silence. The unseen presence haunts the mind more deeply than the spectacle ever could. What is hidden weighs upon men with greater pressure than what is revealed. They cannot fight shadows, yet they cannot ignore them. The shadow becomes their master, and in serving their own fear, they serve you. The measure of rule is not how brightly it shines, but how securely it holds. Those who govern wisely do not scatter their strength upon every occasion. They reserve it, condense it, and release it only when necessity dictates. Power must never become an ornament, for ornaments attract thieves, and every thief waits for the moment when vigilance wanes. To adorn yourself with constant display is to signal both possession and vulnerability. What remains unseen, however, cannot be plundered. Politics demands the careful use of shadows. He who steps too often into the light is not master of his stage, but captive of it. Appearances are instruments to be employed sparingly, each chosen moment serving a precise purpose. Anything beyond necessity corrupts strategy, for excess display blinds the ruler as much as it invites the eyes of others. To master appearances is not to live in them, but to ration them, so that when they are invoked, they strike with undeniable weight. Men are more easily governed by uncertainty than by clarity. Certainty breeds defiance. Uncertainty breeds hesitation. To reveal yourself fully is to provide your adversaries the measure by which they may oppose you. To remain opaque is to cloud their judgment, forcing them to delay, to quarrel among themselves, to fear the unseen more than the visible. In delay lies your advantage, for hesitation is the slow death of resolve. A prince who relies on showmanship must constantly invent new illusions to sustain his hold, but invention is fragile, and the crowd grows restless once the spectacle repeats itself. The discipline of concealment spares him this burden. He controls perception not by multiplying appearances, but by withholding them, so that each revelation is extraordinary, each act definitive, each gesture beyond doubt. A concealed power commands through scarcity, and scarcity amplifies value. To rule is not to dazzle, but to endure. Dazzle blinds, but the blindness passes. Endurance settles into permanence. The ruler who restrains his display forces others to misjudge him, and every misjudgment is a weapon that requires no expenditure of his own. Deception born of silence weakens enemies more thoroughly than deception born of noise. In silence, their imaginations do the labor for you, building a fortress of illusions that serves your cause without your effort. Thus, the art of command lies not in the brilliance of exposure, but in the discipline of concealment. To display less is to possess more. To restrain is to dominate, and to wait is to conquer. Power is not affirmed by being seen. It is secured by being unassailable. And what is unassailable is rarely what stands in the open. It is what hides, waits, and strikes only when resistance is already broken. The moment of decisive action must always emerge from concealment, never from prolonged anticipation. For anticipation dulls impact, granting others time to weave alliances, to harden their defenses, to devise counterweights. A prince who exposes his intentions before the hour of execution hands the battlefield to his adversaries. Yet one who veils his hand until the strike is inevitable leaves no room for resistance. The most effective blows fall not because they are strongest, but because they are unexpected. Power must therefore be understood as the art of timing. To govern without haste is to let others expend themselves in futile preparation against enemies that may not exist. They tire themselves with shadows while you conserve strength for reality. When you act, you do so upon a field already weakened, where suspicion has turned allies against each other, and fatigue has drained their resolve. In such conditions, even modest force achieves overwhelming results. Concealment also safeguards the ruler from betrayal, for betrayal feeds on knowledge. No conspirator can wound what he does not comprehend. No traitor can sell secrets that were never revealed. By keeping the core of your designs hidden, you deny malice the very tools it requires. A ruler betrayed by his own circle has often been guilty first of trusting them with too much. Loyalty is never absolute, but ignorance is. One may change allegiance, but one cannot betray what one does not know. The strength of the concealed ruler is further magnified by the weakness it cultivates in others. Men who live upon appearances are bound to them. They cannot retreat. They cannot adapt, for to do so would unravel the image they have built. When circumstances shift, they remain fixed, prisoners of their own performance. The concealed, by contrast, remains fluid, unburdened by the need to uphold any mask but the one necessity demands. This fluidity is not chaos, it is liberty, the capacity to govern events rather than be governed by them. Consider also that concealment makes your enemies fight ghosts. They exhaust their efforts imagining powers you may not even possess. They stretch their resources thin, guarding against possibilities rather than realities. In this, your silence becomes a weapon sharper than any sword. By showing nothing, you make them guard against everything, and in guarding against everything, they weaken themselves everywhere. The lesson is relentless. The sovereign who binds himself to display builds his reign upon admiration, and admiration is fragile. The sovereign who binds himself to concealment builds his reign upon uncertainty, and uncertainty is enduring. Men may cease to admire, but they will never cease to doubt. Doubt governs them long after applause has vanished, and in their doubt, they remain obedient. Obscurity grants a ruler a resource more precious than gold: unpredictability. When men cannot foresee your movements, they cannot guard against them. They waste themselves in vigilance, never knowing from which angle you may emerge. Their strength bleeds away in defending every path, while you commit yourself to only one. Thus, concealment is not merely protection, but the very engine of advantage, multiplying the weight of each action beyond its substance. The visible prince must constantly feed his image, while the hidden prince feeds only his designs. This difference is decisive. To maintain a spectacle requires endless energy and exposes endless flaws. One misplaced gesture, one careless indulgence, and the carefully painted image cracks. But the concealed prince has no such burden. His silence cannot be contradicted, his absence cannot be disproven, and his strength remains intact precisely because it was never placed upon display. Silence also magnifies fear. Men fear the known enemy because they can measure him. They fear the unknown enemy because they cannot. The fear of the unknown stretches further than the reach of reality. It compels restraint. It curbs defiance. It governs the will more effectively than open threats. A ruler who is feared for what is hidden commands more deeply than one who is feared for what is declared. The first rules through the imagination, the second only through memory. Imagination, once stirred, never rests. Concealment does not mean paralysis. It is not the refusal to act, but the refusal to waste action on vanity. To act in silence is to let the deed itself be the only statement, unclouded by theatrics, unburdened by explanation. Such deeds do not depend on recognition to have effect. They are their own justification, and because they arrive unheralded, they are remembered not as choices, but as necessities, events that seemed inevitable the moment they occurred. The greatest safeguard of rule is necessity. Men obey not because they wish to, but because they must. Concealment transforms your actions into necessity, for when they arrive suddenly, without prelude, no alternative appears available. The strike that falls from silence leaves no time to deliberate, no chance to resist, no ground for rebellion to form. It forces acceptance as though it were fate itself, and what resembles fate is rarely opposed. Therefore, the prince who conceals ensures that his reign is not a performance, but a condition of life. He does not shine for admiration. He weighs upon the world like gravity. The boastful prince may win applause, but applause does not outlast envy. The concealed prince wins endurance, and endurance is the only crown that time does not corrode. To govern without display is to shift the balance of dependence. When subjects and rivals cannot read the measure of your strength, they begin to orient their choices around uncertainty itself. Every calculation bends back toward you, for you are the variable they cannot solve. In this way, concealment enslaves not by chains, but by the mind, compelling others to act cautiously, to delay aggression, to doubt even their own intentions. Doubt spreads faster than loyalty, and once it takes root, it governs whole assemblies more effectively than decrees. The ruler who hides his designs ensures that others reveal theirs first. In silence, you invite them to speak, to boast, to expose their ambitions. Men who hunger for recognition cannot resist unveiling themselves, and in their eagerness, they betray weaknesses. Each word they speak becomes intelligence. Each gesture becomes a confession. You gain knowledge without ever risking your own. Concealment is not merely defense, it is intelligence, for it turns vanity into a weapon that works on your behalf. Ambition cloaked in obscurity travels farther than ambition proclaimed. What is declared becomes an obstacle to its own fulfillment, for others rush to block it. But what is hidden passes unnoticed until it is already achieved. This is the true art of conquest, not to announce, not to invite resistance, but to move as if in darkness, building step upon step until the edifice is unshakable. Then, when it rises into view, no hand is strong enough to topple it. Those who depend on showing off live under constant exposure to envy. Envy corrodes trust, poisons alliances, and arms rivals with reason to unite against you. Concealment denies envy its fuel. It denies rivals the common cause that spectacle would provide. In their blindness, they scatter, each fearing the other more than they fear you. Division among them becomes the shield of the concealed ruler. Unity against you becomes impossible when your true strength remains obscured. Even within yourself, concealment serves discipline. To resist the urge for recognition is to master vanity, and to master vanity is to harden the will. Every ruler faces the temptation to display. Only those who subdue it preserve clarity of judgment. Pride clouds reason, but restraint sharpens it. Thus, concealment is not only a strategy against others, but a training of one's own nature, a safeguard against the intoxication of success. Power preserved is power multiplied. To show it is to spend it, but to conceal it is to let it accumulate interest in silence. When the day of reckoning comes, you will not arrive weakened by countless performances, but fortified by years of guarded preparation. And in that moment, the world will not applaud, you will not need it. It will simply submit, for the work has already been done in the shadows where true rule is born. The sovereign who understands concealment commands not only his enemies, but also time itself. By withholding, he stretches moments into weapons, creating intervals where others grow restless, impatient, careless. Impatience is the ally of the silent, for it pushes adversaries to reveal themselves too early, to commit too fully, to act without the certainty that patience would have given them. Each premature strike against you strengthens your position, for it exposes their hand while yours remains unplayed. Secrecy reshapes alliances as well. Allies drawn to a prince who shows off come for the promise of reflected glory, but such loyalty evaporates once brighter lights appear. The alliances of the hidden prince are steadier, for they are built not on spectacle, but on necessity, on bonds no outsider can measure or disrupt. Visibility invites comparison, and comparison invites betrayal. Obscurity denies comparison, making loyalty more durable. A ruler's strength is measured not by how many admire him, but by how few can predict him. To be legible is to be vulnerable. To be unreadable is to be invulnerable. Predictability creates openings, but opacity creates paralysis. In this paralysis lies the secret of dominion, for men cannot unite against what they do not understand. They quarrel among themselves, inventing interpretations, dissipating their energy while you preserve your own. The temptation to show off is a corruption of ambition. It confuses recognition with achievement, noise with command, attention with security. But attention is the weakest form of power, for it belongs to the spectator, not the actor. The concealed prince reverses this balance. He denies attention and in so doing, claims control over it. Others speak of him, wonder about him, speculate endlessly, but he himself remains unmoved, governing the rhythm of their thoughts while revealing none of his own. Concealment also transforms defeat. When the visible prince falters, his weakness is magnified, for all can see it and rush to exploit it. His fall becomes a spectacle equal to his rise. But when the hidden prince suffers loss, it passes unnoticed, shrouded in silence. He preserves the appearance of strength, even in retreat, because no one is certain what has diminished and what remains intact. Concealment, therefore, not only multiplies victory, but also disguises failure, ensuring stability in both fortune and misfortune. The enduring lesson is that the will to rule must be colder than the hunger for admiration. To reign is not to shine, but to weigh, not to entertain, but to decide, not to parade, but to endure. The stage belongs to actors. The throne belongs to those who can vanish from it at will, returning only when necessity demands. In this vanishing lies the secret that sustains power across seasons, beyond applause, against envy, through betrayal. Silence is not absence, it is dominion. The end of power is not to be seen, but to be obeyed. Those who spend their lives chasing visibility exhaust themselves in the theater of appearances, only to discover that applause cannot defend them when envy sharpens its knives. To show off is to mistake spectacle for sovereignty, and such a mistake is paid in blood. The prince who endures does not waste himself in display. He builds in silence. He waits without vanity. He strikes without warning. His strength is never fully known, his reach never fully measured, his designs never fully grasped. In this opacity lies his advantage, for what cannot be defined cannot be resisted. Men may admire brilliance, but they submit to uncertainty. Admiration fades, uncertainty endures. To rule is to accept necessity, and necessity is rarely adorned. It is cold, it is silent, it is unseen until it falls upon the world like fate itself. Concealment is not weakness. It is the shield that guards ambition from envy, the weapon that turns hesitation into surrender, the discipline that frees the ruler from vanity's chains. Let others waste themselves in display, mistaking light for strength, mistaking applause for authority. You must choose the path of endurance, the path of silence, the path where every act is deliberate and every revelation irreversible. For in the end, power is not measured by what the world sees. It is measured by what the world cannot touch. And so remember, the shadow commands more deeply than the spotlight ever can. Those who live to be admired will fall with their image. Those who live to endure will rule long after the applause has turned to dust. Concealment is not the enemy of power. It is its final perfection.